Hi, my name is Veronica Swift. For the past 4 years, I've been writing a blog on the hidden occult, including the Luciferian Brotherhood, the Jesuit Order, and other clandestine groups and their members and structure. These groups perpetrate in horrendous ways. They inflict torture, programming, mind control, organized and ritualized abuse, and other abuses on large numbers of individuals in an effort to gain power, advance in rank, stay relevant, and make money. The survivors of this organized victimization often live in fear and in silence. Their experiences are unfamiliar and often shocking to those who have not survived trauma. In between those who have experienced horrific abuse and those who have not experienced any abuse at all are people who have had varying levels of trauma in their life, from non-ritualized severe childhood abuse to much milder trauma like car accidents or difficult medical procedures. People who have experienced significant trauma in their life via the organized occult are often called survivors. At the other end of the spectrum are non-survivors who have not experienced much trauma. I've devoted nearly 100% of my free time for 4 years now to helping non-survivors understand and appreciate the hell that survivors have been through. It's not easy to take complicated systems and very difficult concepts and make them easy to understand. Now I feel led to also help bridge the gap between non-survivors and survivors, and to do so in a healthy way. There is so much out in the public arena that is unhealthy and misunderstood. Non-survivors often annoy survivors with what survivors consider inappropriate questions. Survivors often lash out at non-survivors for expecting things they can almost never provide, like proof that they were abused as an infant. This is the first of a series of 4 roundtable discussions between individuals that run the gamut of experience of trauma, from not much to extreme levels. My hope is that these conversations can inform, educate, and improve the health of survivor relationship with non-survivors, so that testimonies of abuse can be heard and understood and the stigma removed from discussing difficult topics like this. Welcome, everyone, to the Survivor Roundtable edition of V in the Wild. And I have with me 4 tremendous women. Carrie Saint, who you may have seen before on Aquarius Rising Africa, and Amy, who is a nurse, and Lead Cow, who is in every chat that we are ever in online with some podcasts. She is a longtime friend of an SRA survivor, and the indomitable Adena Hodges, who has her own survivor group transformations and also a YouTube channel called Testimony Mountain that I have appeared on, I think now 12 times. So that's pretty impressive for me because I wasn't expecting to go more than once. So welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you are here. Just pleased as punch that we could all get together, because that's a challenge these days to get any group of people together all at once to do something like this. So I wanted to talk for today's session about survivor and non-survivor relationships. And some of the suggestions that I see online are pretty interesting. And some of the responses that survivors have to non-survivor questions are pretty interesting. And I think it all stems from the fact that if you aren't introduced to what a survivor goes through from severe trauma, then it's hard to know how to relate to them. So I'm hoping today we can discuss some of these real world ideas, see what we think of them, and then maybe come up with some ideas to put out there into the podcast world, so that people can get some ideas of better ways to relate to one another. Relationships are hard enough, but when you start adding trauma to the mix, it can be really difficult. So I've got one here I wanted to start with that I pulled up from X, and this is an individual who posted this, who is a survivor of ritual abuse and mind control. Ritual abuse would be severe, ongoing, usually childhood abuse, although it could be adult abuse as well. They're also mind control, which has to do with, it's too long to explain if you don't know what mind control is and you're a listener. Essentially, it's what occult groups or cultish groups do to individuals who they want to control, and they want to make them they want to make them pliable, and they want to make them kind of robotic to do what they want to do. So this person says, this is homework for every single one of you who isn't a survivor. First step, he's got 4 steps. You're going to make a Venmo account specifically for your contributions to ritual abuse, mind
Read it.
control survivors. Second, you're going to type up a 2-page essay of exactly what you think all this is. You're going to print it out, you're going to staple it, and you're going to go to public places and hand this thing out to people while you're gathering donations for ritual abuse mind control survivors. And third, you're going to keep that account and you're going to donate the money that you collect to, and he named two different organizations that I'm not going to say right now, but two different organizations that he thinks are valuable. And then fourth, you'll continue this weekly on top of everything else you do for survivors. Get better information, stay humble. Your service to survivors is long overdue. He says, and you're catching up to a job that should have come naturally to you. You want to help? Do it. And this is common. Like people who first learn about ritual abuse want to know what we can do. What can we do to help? So my question to all of you is, should someone who is first coming across ritual abuse mind control survivors, should they follow those 4 steps or not?
I was sitting here in shock. I'm sorry with what you were reading out. So my answer is quite obvious. So the intention's good, but it's going to be fraught with
Mhm.
absolute disaster.
Disaster, Carrie says. Marilyn,
Yeah.
what do you think? Yeah, Adina?
Well, it's not, there's so many infiltrated groups that even knowing if the group you're donating to really does what they say they're going to do is another tricky place. Uh,
Hmm.
and I believe that what we need most is more relational healing, not money being thrown at us.
Okay. Amy, what do you think?
Well, I think it's just bizarre sounding, just bizarre.
Would you go do that? Would you, if you came across those steps, would you actually do it?
You know, I don't think that I would. Just, I mean, it doesn't seem logical. Like anyone would respond. I think you'd be met with a whole lot of non-response. I mean, I think people would probably think that I'd lost my mind.
Yeah. That's I kind of thought I'd lost my mind reading it.
Yeah.
I thought it's kind of odd too to me that someone would suggest writing up a paper and handing out a paper
Hmm.
right, to random people on the street.
And I don't think I want to be your next project.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
That's
that's
a
a good
good
point.
point.
Okay, so that's kind of the one of the more out there suggestions that I've seen, and my response to that was like, I'm not going to create a special account just for survivors. And why would they be? I couldn't even figure out why they would be asking that. That seemed kind of odd to me.
Mm.
Here's another suggestion someone had. They said that in their community, so that this person had a community, and they thought it was important that if you see someone bullying a survivor, you better stand up for that person. You better stand up as a group against that person, and you better delete them from whatever channel they're on or place they're in. You better kick them out and stand up as a group against them. Thoughts on that?
Well, that could be really, I mean, I've been attacked and I've seen attacks in there. And I mean, you just can't, it's not black and white like that. I believe you got to be led with your heart, period, when it
Hmm.
comes to this stuff. And I had read that last one too that you mentioned, and I was like, whoa, it almost was like what do they call it? Reparations or whatever that the uh, uh, Black Americans are calling
Hmm.
for on the last question. But to me, it feels like, I just think it's very, I think you have to go, I think you have to let a survivor lead and you have to let them all do what they want. I mean, we all have the right to feel the way we want. But when someone calls for something like that, I almost look, I mean, I really have red flags fly up going, is this, because it could be an enemy that's, I don't know. I don't even know how to put it in words. I don't get it. Doesn't feel right to me. I think you have to be, it's more, you have to lead with your heart in everything, and that doesn't feel heartfelt. I think we all, when I've been in groups before, and there's been people that, I mean, usually people will go, hey, we don't do that here, or but you don't just form a group and now you're behind them, because it's so easy. Like I've been, I don't, I'm most people probably know about Gray, and I mean, all I did was have an opinion and I got attacked by him, and then there was 10 people attacked me, and I'm like, what on earth is this about? So that's what it felt like to me when you asked that question, is that we could be doing harm against, we could really be negligent in many ways doing that.
Harry, Adena, Amy?
Agree.
I was going to say I've kind of been at the flip side of both ends, because I've been interviewed on particular YouTube channels, and I must say that the people that were interviewing me, later on you see comments, and some people have gone into really have a go at you or run you down. I was always generally pretty good at trying to talk with people, and I suppose if the person that had interviewed me knew that I could handle certain situations, but there were times when I'd check the comments and you could see where the person had really pulled someone up, or I had to remove them from the group. And sometimes what was helpful for me was having that person relay to me why they would have had to do that, because you've got to keep everybody within who is reading safe. I run a support group for survivors of forced adoption, and a lot of those who are in that group have suffered horrendous abuse as well, and it ranges. So when setting up my Facebook group where we all talk to one another and share information, I have guidelines, and those guidelines have a one warning only, but it's also set up that if you have a grievance with anybody, it's to be done privately, never publicly. And also that if you have a problem, always come to me. So, and even if it's a person that I have to pull the plug with, go, look, you've had your warning. If they continue, then I would remove them. But I always provided the avenue, come and speak to me about it. I'm never closed off to whatever is happening for you, because, you just never know who got in there or why they're being triggered. And a lot of my survivors are extremely angry about what's happened to them, because, they've been unable to access appropriate services. They're very angry at the government. They're very angry at individuals and politicians. And then somebody innocently comes in and says something, and the next minute there's a grenade in the room. My first thought is that I am, as somebody who sets up anything, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Facebook, I have a responsibility to everybody that comes into that group. And even the ones that are losing it and being aggressive or bombastic, I have a responsibility to care for them as much as I do the person that's sitting quietly saying nothing, who's too fearful to say something. So I think as anybody that takes that leadership in setting up must take accountability for setting it up in that way and making sure everybody is safe.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I've been in groups. I was in a Facebook group for survivors for a while, until I got attacked by the moderator. And the group owner didn't take responsibility for the moderator. I don't think they knew what they were doing. But I wound up leaving the group because it was, pretty horrific. So I think it goes around a lot more than is realized. These groups are filled with people who have hair triggers, and the moderators are key, and the ownership is key. So I agree with you 100% on that. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really appreciated what Carrie shared with agreement. I've not done a whole lot on social media. I kind of stay out of that arena, and so I haven't faced as much of that as some of you. And I think we want to be treated like other people. And so, what are the kind of basic humanity guidelines would you have for anyone? Nobody likes a bully, but I think having those clear guidelines is helpful for everyone and makes a safe place. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think setting the expectation, and that's an amazing job you do by what you said, Carrie. I worked in insurance for a long time, and you have nothing but people that have had they're in chaos. And if you tell them, okay, an adjuster's going to call you right back, or you go, hey, it might be 3 days because we've got to, whatever. And just setting the expectation clears a lot of the stuff out. You just avoid it to begin with. So that's great. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it gets resolved privately away from everyone else being affected by it. And that's so important to do that. With Adena, I have meetings at government level with survivors, and you'll get people sitting across from you, throw a grenade in the room, and I've watched government workers sit there with frozen, and it's another survivor that's had to respond to de-escalate it. And I've also been party and watched how government bodies who are responsible to care for the survivors in the sense of post-adoption care, like because we had federal and state apologies here, and a lot of the peak body groups got together, but a lot of traumatized victims were traumatizing victims running groups, and then the government and the government funded organizations weren't doing anything to make sure we were all safe. And I made a lot of noise about it, and ultimately the government set up a consultant which spoke to us all, and we worked through a lot of the issues. It didn't fix everything, but it certainly set the groundwork as to how we should operate and what we should demand of ourselves and of others, to be present and to acknowledge, this was the big thing, acknowledge the lived experience of the other person. And I find that amongst survivors, unfortunately, there can be my pain's worse than your pain. And then it becomes almost like a power struggle to assert themselves, and the person who is the non-survivor doesn't know how to work through that. It's like they become helpless or enablers in the dysfunction of it, and it's something I'm constantly addressing.
So should there be perhaps someone set up or designated as a mediator, moderator in advance in groups like this? Someone who's responsible for taking control if things go awry? Would that be a good guideline to have, do you think, or not?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean,
I think so.
When I look at a lot of, and I do, being a survivor myself, I try to listen to as many stories as possible and gather as much, be educated as possible, because I never know what I'm going to run into the next day, in my work helping people here in Australia. And, you've got one person who is probably quite charismatic. They may have a lived experience themselves. They're quite articulate and whatever, but do they have a team behind them that is making them aware of things and skills that they should have when actually interviewing, and debriefing afterwards? Is there a debrief afterwards for the survivor that's told their story? Have they gone away like so vulnerable after and that they've told their story and exposed? Like, I think there's a duty of care to take care of anybody that you actually interview. It's basically, I see it no worse than if you're going off for the doctors and you're having an operation and you've got a wound that's just been totally opened up, and they're going off and you haven't sewed it up and you haven't made sure there's aftercare.
Right. That brings up another thing that I see quite often that distresses me, which is show hosts, podcast hosts, interviewing survivors, and then subsequently, kind of without warning in many cases, just taking down their podcasts. They remove them. There's kind of no warning. The survivor doesn't seem to have any right to their own story.
Oh, no, that's weird.
Isn't that strange? So it's almost like the podcast owner has the only rights to the show, and the survivor gets dumped and feels terrible and doesn't seem to have any way to get their own video or put it up for themselves. They don't seem to, they could actually have it struck, even if they did put it up on their own channel, because they didn't insist on, I guess, co-copyright is what I like to call it. They don't necessarily have any rights to even put it up again on their own site. So it's almost an abusive pattern, in my opinion, that it must feel violating. I don't know. Should survivors insist on having their own the rights to their own story and podcast?
I think so, absolutely. That's traumatizing. I've witnessed that, and you just can't go away from that. What it does is it makes them spin out and trying to figure out what happened, and it's almost like well, obviously they're re-traumatized, but it's almost like I get the sense that they feel they're being punished, and it just could spin a wide array of problems for that person. I mean, we're talking about people that are sharing intimate details of their life, and I've always thought that was shocking. I'm pretty new to the whole, I was on computers for work my whole life, so I never got into it. I'm a latecomer to the internet and playing on it. I'm retired now, so yay, I get to do that. It's fun. I'm excited that there's such a big presentation of survivors, because I'm like, wow, this is awesome. But when I see what happens, it's like, oh my God, it's shocking. I've seen people put in very dangerous, or I'm perceiving this. They're not saying I'm feeling, but I mean, it could be. I've worked in crisis, and I just think it's not a good thing. They should have. I can't believe it's even happening. I just assumed everybody had. We're sharing this. This is mine. It's my story. I'm letting you benefit off of it, if you want to label it that way. So I think that should be a given, in my opinion, that they have all control of the story. They have all control of the pace. They have all control of everything. They can even say, you know what? I don't want you putting that out anymore. They should have the control of their story, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, most definitely. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a Wild West out there, isn't it, when it comes to people set out with absolutely no skill or training or whatever in mental health issues, or in trauma, actually really skilled in it, and have spent time studying or working with people in the background. They've sort of, I think through COVID, a lot of it popped up because people lost jobs, and they thought, oh good, I'll start a YouTube channel and I'll do this. And I'd hate to think the amount of survivors that have been so damaged by thinking, oh great, somebody is really wanting me to speak up, and to be heard is everything, and having the person who's facilitating and interviewing looking really interested and empathetic, and then somehow that goes awry, and then you're feeling brutalized all over, and used and abused. Your trust disappears, your self-esteem goes down for a chimney swipe. And I've known survivors to end up in hospital. I've known survivors to suicide. So
everything can trigger suicide. You can trigger suicide programming. I mean, it's just that's why I say the number one thing is to lead with your heart, because these people have and most people, well, not most people, but I've seen it from both sides. And I'm telling you, the people that are out there helping, from the world I come from, it was not big amount. Even in the crisis center I worked for, the people that worked there, they were sicker than the people that we were trying to help with their the weight. I mean, as an example, I witnessed this man had been diagnosed with, I think, schizophrenia. Lots of them. There was I worked in the crisis center, and then up Matt. And what happens is a lot of them are put on medications that cause them, they just feel like they're starving all the time. The psych meds do that, have that side effect. And so they guard their food. And this man had cooked some chicken, and someone had stolen a piece of his chicken out of the oven. And I watched a staff member tell that man, no, you didn't, he didn't do that. And I was here all the time, and I'm like going, no, you weren't. You were in the office with me. I mean, but it's just they go, the survivors, or everybody goes through it, but it can be, it can be life threatening when you're dealing with some of this stuff. And it is just there's people that get their own egos, their own, like, for instance, my friend who I supported up until her dying day, she went through, I don't know how many psychiatrists to get to, and this wasn't even about her being a survivor. It was they couldn't get past the fact she was a Jehovah's Witness. It's like people. So yeah, I really love that you're doing this, Veronica, because I hope something good comes out of this, because it is. And what you said, Carrie, is that it is just like a crazy Wild West show out there, and there's a lot of damage being done. And this is not, survivors are the key to exposing what's going on in our world. So it's like, let's just shoot them, in the foot before we get, it's just, it's not good. It's not good. And it's not.
Yeah, no, it seems like usury in a sense to me in some cases where, yeah, like the show host becomes more important than the person being featured. And that distresses me. I think that's a terrible,
Me too.
terrible, terrible way to see the burgeoning numbers of survivor testimonies online. And then to have people say, but where did it go? It's suddenly gone. And that's because the show host isn't mature enough, or whatever the case may be, whether they're demanding.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've actually seen it where they demand things from the survivor. They post like demand letters in private chat or DM. You do this, and I'll put your podcast back up.
Oh, that
And if
is
you don't,
terrible.
yeah, it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch because it is a re-traumatizing. It's a control freak kind of a thing. I actually think it nobody if that's happened, I don't know. You tell me what you think. If that's happened to a survivor from a show host, I think that should be a warning to all other survivors to stay away. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think many survivors see through it, but some are, triggered for whatever, a comment in the chat or whatever, and can go into a panic. But I think I have never seen more intelligence in a group of people than higher intelligence than in what I've been exposed to with survivors. They can read I can read easily emotions from people, but it's like split second. They can tell exactly how you're feeling, exactly what you're really saying. And if they're in a position in their path in healing enough to avoid it, because a lot of it triggers and throws them into chaos. But if they get far enough to where they're in a healing to where they're using that, they have superpowers. I mean, it's amazing. And yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I believe that the survivor should have all the control. And I get it. I don't know anyone that isn't honest and just wants to get their story out and be part of this awakening and that. So I don't know why there would be the need for this other stuff other than egos are getting in the way somehow.
I would share just a little different perspective, being my own podcast, and I fully agree with what you guys have said. Is that threatening and doing all kinds of things. At the same time, I have had to at least make unlisted a video or two because the survivors started attacking me. Now I'm a survivor too,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I began to hear from other people and they were attacking my support team and spreading rumors about me. And so that was a case where it was like, and they had done videos on other platforms. Mine is just a little one anyway. It's really not that significant. And so I just chose to unlist it. That way they did still had access to it because they have the link.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't, knowing what they were doing and what they were spreading, that wasn't a behavior that I wanted to have promoting on my channel. So just
No.
saying there's kind of two sides, or can be two
I
sides.
agree with that as well. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's this is the importance of having all of you here and your wide variety of experiences, because there's more, there's often more to the story. There's more than what we see on the outside. Looking in is not always what the reality is, for sure. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add to that? I have another little prompt I can read. Okay, this is from a recent book that I read. One thing I wish I had during my healing was more support from people who understood what it means to heal from ritual abuse and mind control. I don't just mean support in a therapeutic sense, but also just friends who could hear a little about it without judgment or fear. I know that some survivors find mutual support in online or in-person groups. While I would love to be a part of giving and receiving support and just being able to talk about those issues that such groups involve, I'm cautious about the potential for survivors, myself included, being forced by groups to access or trigger others in the groups. I've experienced being triggered in this way several times, and it impeded my own healing.
I got the first half, but I got lost somewhere in it on the second part you said.
Basically, I think this individual is saying, gosh, I wish I had more one-on-one interaction.
Yeah.
I wish there were people who wouldn't, so that it's not just in a group setting where there can be problems
Oh yeah.
for some
absolutely.
individuals. But I wish I had more friends. I wish I had individual people that weren't afraid of listening to what I had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we put ourselves out there? I mean, like
Right.
to make the other person feel safe, to let them know we're a safe space.
Right.
Like, what does that even look like to a survivor? Like, do they have enough trust to even tell their best friend, like this happened to me, and will anybody believe me? And or do they feel like they have to go on these platforms and do these interviews?
Yeah, that's a key question. How can you reach out to someone who's had a life that maybe doesn't allow them to trust very much anybody at all? And yet, you know that if there's one person who wishes they had a friend, there are probably a whole bunch of people who aren't. I mean, I see a bulk of survivors who won't go on any show. They're not going to talk publicly about their experiences. They're not going to share. So you're right, Amy. How do we find them, first of all? Second of all, how do you let someone know that you're a safe person, you're trustworthy, and that you're willing to listen? I don't know the answer to that question either, but I think it's a key one for right now. How do we connect people with those who aren't out in the groups? They're not out in the public sphere. Any ideas?
Hard one.
I might be able to answer this, at least from my perspective, being an adoptee and someone who suffered abuse at the hands of both my adoptive parents. And of course, I had repressed memories and went through a horrific time of remembering and horrid ordeal of, unqualified, untrained mental health workers and so-called professionals. And I actually went public with my story in a local newspaper, 2009. And I had people from all over Australia and even the world contact me And of course, that basically got me going in more into the lobbying sphere and setting up an actual support group. And it's funny because you can have your support groups, you can have your online stuff, which I have, but I also have little intimate meetings with particular people affected by forced adoption. And a lot of adoptees will tell you that when we're in a group together, there's a real difference between being with non-adoptees and adopted people. Adopted people speak a language that we just get, where we feel safe immediately. We're able to convey and communicate in a way that we naturally just mesh together. Doesn't mean we're not triggered at times, but there becomes an unspoken bond. We've been through a very similar trauma, and those little relationships become very healthy. So yes, I do a lot of online stuff, and I encourage my members to find the time to get off the internet, to go to connect with somebody, organize to meet them at the local cafe, just do a normal everyday thing, like just having lunch at a cafe somewhere. And I wouldn't even be encouraging a big group for starters. It's just one or two people, and just slowly building those relationships, and even defining what and talking about some things we talk about here. What keeps us safe? How do we keep each other safe? What are no-go zones to talk about? Because I've actually sat in with survivors, and you're having a discussion at local park. I'll use this as an example. And we were just talking, all of a sudden, someone dissociated straight away, but she was good enough to say, I have to stop talking, I'm being triggered. So there were little things like that, and that's immediately when you had to care for that person. So there are things that you can do. I think often we try to bite off more than we can chew. I think it's baby steps with little things like that. And always meet. If you're going to meet somebody, don't meet them at your house. Meet them at a place where you feel safe. Where, if it doesn't go well, they don't know where you live. You don't have to exchange phone numbers. It's all about, protecting your privacy at home. And I think as somebody who supports and is a survivor, I really have to guard some of my personal life. You really have to nurture and take care of that. It's not everything is for public consumption and shouldn't be. And so yeah, that's sort of, I think maybe I've said enough on that, but yeah, I'll leave that for others to have a say too.
Yeah, that's I think an important point. You can meet in person with people, and you don't have to give them any personal information. You can just say, "Hey, here's this cafe. Is it accessible to you? Let's have coffee." And I'll be wearing a purple shirt and, pink roller skates or whatever it might be. I think that the in-person stuff too, I think online it's really easy to get duped in a sense by people who don't have to show who exactly they are. That's a lot harder to do that for many people in person. So I think you could potentially feel safer meeting up with somebody and just being able to suss them out in person one-on-one for sure. Adena, your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe that the main way that we heal is relationally, that is an essential part. Because not only do we have the damage to be healed, but we've also missed a lot of relational skills because of the damage. And so it's actually in community that we need to learn how to safely develop those skills relationally to be successful in life. And so I've been so blessed with the communities that I feel like God's given me, because I don't feel like it's anything I've done. But it's just been beautiful to see the growth and survivors learning how to speak up for what they need, how to interact with one another, and when they get triggered, learning how to speak up and to be able to work through those challenges. When it comes to meeting people on the outside, I think that it's the little by little, sharing little bits at a time and seeing how the person reacts or responds. Now, I say that, but then recently, there was a new relationship for me, and I did feel safe with the person, but it was kind of like, and a lot of survivors do this. It was kind of like it came to a point where internally it was like, I just got to tell you all. And if you stick around, then you're my friend. You know,
Mhm.
Fortunately, they did, which I'm very blessed with. But, I think the little bite-size pieces and taking things slowly is the best way with people who are non-survivors.
Most definitely.
How can you express to a survivor that you are trustworthy? Because just saying I'm a trustworthy person doesn't really work,
Mm.
So what engenders trust? What would you consider to be a visible or tangible experience of trust with someone?
It's really hard, and people need to go with their gut. Um,
Yeah.
and it's challenging because you've got all the cult programming, and you may have cult trying to access you, and they can seem like they're really nice and sincere, and they may or may not be. Um, for me personally, as a Christian, my faith is the main part of that, is being able to ask God, is this a safe person? Is this not? Is this a relationship you mean for me to be part of or not? And then one of the things that we teach in our groups, as well as, is what all of us long for, is to be attuned to. And that is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Understand, or do you want to understand? And so really looking for those qualities. Is somebody just trying, you know, win me over because they have something, their own agenda? Or do I feel that it's genuine? And so that we need to go with our gut on that.
Yeah. Hmm.
They
All
say
right.
that
Go
they
ahead.
say that 63% of your communication is body language. And that's why I always try when I talk to people to, you know, to actually see them responding back. And that's how I read whether I can build trust with them. I don't think it's straight off they are a trustworthy person. I think it's in my brain, are they displaying over time that they are going to be a trustworthy person? And you'll have little clues along the way, and you build up to that. And that's why it's so important that as survivors that you don't offload. And I think we do that all at once, because it's like, if I tell you all the yucky parts and you're still sticking around, I figure you're going to like me, and we're going to have this, but have something good come out of it. But that can also go very disastrous as well. You're handing over too much information, that person's not absorbing it. So I pick up on people being very active listeners, and really good eye contact, and whether they're also being respectful to body space, and are they being a bit more attuned to watching or being aware of even the little movements that you make. Or they might say it's in their language, it's I've noticed, and it takes it out of I think when they're saying stuff, I've noticed. So they're little things I pick up on, whether I feel that I can trust somebody, because when the language is important. Yeah. And I think for survivors, a lot of them, because I had this issue, I overrode my intuition. And it is all based on my abuse. So I'd have my intuition screaming at me, and I would override it and shut it down. And I worked out over time that, oh boy, that was a doozy, Kerry. Like, you should have paid attention in the very beginning, and you kept shutting it down. So don't underestimate intuition, most definitely. So that was a bad habit, and I'm still working on it. So yeah, that's kind of, to me, intuition's like God inside going, hey, hey, I need you to back up here. Ooh, slow it down. So yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. How would you take it if someone asked you periodically, "How you doing? How you feeling? Are you okay? Have I overstepped my boundaries? Is there a way for you to tell me? Are you going to tell me, or do I have to ask?" Is that kind of communication helpful? It almost seems overdone. If you were a non-survivor speaking to another non-survivor, you wouldn't ask those kinds of questions. But are they helpful, or do you think they would be helpful in a survivor non-survivor relationship?
I think it's helpful. Again, is it coming from the heart?
Hmm.
And part of that authenticity and vulnerability that is part of a relationship is when you're willing to be yourself and not have all the masks. At the same time, sometimes I've, you know, stumbled across when I'm working with clients that just asking, how are you doing is a trigger.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They don't want that question. And so and it's having the sensitivity to understand and not being afraid to make a mistake. If we make a mistake, it's okay when it's coming genuinely from the heart and someone says something that can trigger, but being able to have the openness and the communication to go, you know what, that kind of hurt the way you said that. Could we maybe not do that? Um,
Hmm. And we
Mm.
have to
And you
be,
would have to be vulnerable. Nobody likes to be vulnerable.
Mm.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable. I think that has to be that step up, though.
Yeah, to heal or continue on your healing journey. I mean, even as a non-survivor, I think all of us can relate. We all
Mhm.
have things that we're healing from, and it's hard to be vulnerable with some of those things. So I can only imagine as a survivor, like where would where do you start? I really love listening to this.
We love having you here. You're an important part of the discussion. I think it's important to hear from everybody. That's why I wanted us kind of a spectrum of people from maybe severe abuse all the way down to not, because there's just we all just have different experiences and different ideas about how things work. We see things differently, and it's good. It's good. Other people can
Mhm.
find themselves in the spectrum of experiences and learn things.
Mm.
Definitely. All
Yeah.
right, I have a last prompt here. This is someone who posted recently, just in the past couple days on Twitter X. Uh, this is a person who is a survivor asking questions about what can they do. So sometimes, well, especially in the beginning of writing, I got a lot asked a lot, what can I do as a non-survivor by people to help survivors? And I didn't have any answers in the first 2 years of writing. I had absolutely no idea because I was just struggling to learn the basics. But this lady says, something I've been thinking about that frustrates me is how little I can do for kids in danger compared to others. I have chronic health issues. I don't have a lot of money. I've tried volunteering and have dissociated so much I couldn't function there. Can't really drive long distances. It's not a pity party thing. It's a question of what can I do? So I sow seeds of information. I share my testimony in hopes it makes even a dent. I feel like I've exhausted my options. I've been working on this for 4 years to make some sort of a difference. If anybody has any ideas, let me know. Seriously, there's got to be something.
Mm.
Beautiful. And to me, there is something for everybody. I believe that prayer is powerful.
Mm.
And the more people who are interceding for survivors, the better. And so, when it seems like there's nothing you can do, there is prayer, and anybody can do that if they have faith.
Oh.
And then beyond that, just asking the Lord, would you lead me to, how I can.
Mhm.
And sometimes, as we were talking earlier, just a listening ear is so valuable and needed. Someone to come
Yeah.
alongside you and say, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And you're
Mm.
and just that human contact can be so healing for survivors. And then I believe look for places where people are actually making a difference. And I believe, not giving money to just people that sound good and that have all of this kind of stuff out there because there's so much fraud and, infiltration and so on. But get to know people who are actually making a difference and see how you can help. Um, those are some ways I would suggest.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think that I've got to be helping a lot of people to be making a difference. I think if you're helping
Mhm.
one person, just one, that makes a huge difference because it has a ripple effect. That one person is, being helped, and they may have children or uh, partners, or yeah, and you just never know. Like the smallest thing can change something for somebody, and yeah, it's not because I see it, and I've seen people get so worked up and so angry because they're hearing so many more stories of survivors and what's happening to the children. How can I help? And yes, money seems to be, well, we'll just throw money at it. Well, unfortunately, you don't know where that money's going, if it's actually going to the people that really need it. So yeah, I loved everything that you said, Adena. Prayer,
Mhm.
like the power of prayer is just really incredible. And you know, not trying to overextend yourself, feeling so weighted. I mean, we're supposed to give all of our burdens to the Lord. So, when we try to carry them and we feel responsible so much for other human beings, we end up not being very helpful in a sense because we're weighted down, and we get weighted down
Yeah.
by a lot of guilt. And it's about, well, the Lord can handle this. I just need to be able to uplift this person to the Lord at the moment, and that's all I can do. But it could be as simple little things like, just sending them a card, or something like, I'm thinking of you. Just something really small, just that really I've seen people where somebody's just scrawled on a note and left it on a belonging of somebody's, a torn up note going, I want to say you're a really special, fight today, and the Lord says you're special, just something. And you just see the looks on their faces. It's like they look around and they're like, well, who left that? Like, it doesn't have to be monumentous, the help and support, if you're unable to do it. Yeah, every small, a kind word, a smile, a listening ear, um just a word of encouragement, that those things are really huge.
Excellent. Well, we have used up almost an hour, and I've run out of prompts. So I'm going to call it an end today, and I thank you all for being here. I think there are a lot of good things that have been discussed. I think that a lot of this will be very useful for a lot of people. So I appreciate your time and your energy and your wisdom and your participation. I'll just end off with a little prayer, and then we will move on to the next topic. So next time, I think we'll talk about memory, perhaps. And after that, maybe dissociation. If you're all willing to come back in 2 weeks and do it again, that would be fantastic. All right, dear Lord, thank you so much for all these special women. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for the good ideas. And please let it may have blessed someone, or maybe many someones, who need this information. And as you know, but probably these women don't know, every time I pray, I cry. So there you go. My tears and my words and my heart are for the betterment of everybody, especially survivors at this time when everything is kind of burgeoning and they need guidance as well as the non-survivors. So we can all help one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, ladies. It was good to see you.
Thank
Lovely
you.
Nice to meet you all, and we will.
meeting you. It was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
All
can't
right.
wait to talk to you guys in 2 weeks.
Yes, be great. All right. Bye, Amy. Bye, Dina. Bye,
Bye,
Lean
y'all.
Cow. Bye, Veronica.
Bye.
One.
Okay, bye.